shall I? Oh, so it's being recorded. Okay, continue. So shall I sort of start things off then? Is that okay?
Absolutely,
yeah, okay.
Go for it, Sue.
Okay, so right, well, thanks ever so much to everybody for joining us in our Sugi Fuel webinar. I'd like to thank Adina as well for organising it, so thanks ever so much, Adina, and to Iris for offering to do it. I think I've already said, and I was talking to Iris earlier on, that her talk seems to fit very, very nicely with one of the foci of the Bristol Urban Living Labs, the harvesting of waste phosphorus from effluent from a wastewater treatment plant. So, you know, that's really good. I mean, you know, it's going to be really interesting to the rest of us. So I'm not just saying it's just one person. So I'm really looking forward to it. So without further ado, then I shall hand over to Iris and mute myself.
Okay, so I need to share my screen, and from my experience, it takes a few minutes until everything is gathered together. Let's hope it will be smooth.
As you do that, I can quickly just make an announcement that we are going to have 2 more webinars, one in December and one in January, that are already on the plans, and then we'll go on after that with some students maybe in February.
Okay. So do you see my screen now?
Yes. I wonder if I could ask everybody to mute so that we don't get feedback. Is that, if you don't mind, please?
Great, yeah.
Okay. So hi everyone, I'm Iris Zohar from Israel, and I would like to thank Adina for inviting me to speak here today. And I must tell you that I was lucky to be hosted at Adina's lab at UCSC for about 6 months in 2008 during my PhD. This is where we met. And I'm from Migal, Galilee Research Institute, the Hydrobiogeochemistry Laboratory, and Tel Hai Academic College. I will just let you see where we are at. So here is Israel, okay, part of the continent of Asia, as I mentioned a minute ago. And here is Israel in the Middle East, just at the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. And at the, take this tiny bit of Israel, and at the northern tip of it is the Upper Galilee. Hula Valley is there. And there you can find the Tel Hai College, Academic College, and Meigal. And in Meigal, the Galilee Research Institute is the Hydrogeochemistry Laboratory. And we can get back to our talk. And I'm going to talk today about phosphorus recycling from waste to resource. And we'll see how we go through production, characterization, and phosphorus reuse. Phosphorus has a great importance for recovery and recycling. And you can see that in the recent few years, there has been a lot of research regarding phosphorus scarcity and the need to recycle it. Let's look at some of the titles, like Global Phosphorus Supply Chain Dynamics, assessing regional impact to 2050, towards global phosphorus security, systems framework for phosphorus recovery and reuse options. Other titles just for you to be impressed by that. And you can also see that there are many papers that deal with phosphorus recovery, like phosphorus sorption and recovery using mineral-based materials or filter materials and so forth. You can find a lot of them in recent years. Our talk outlines include first a general introduction that will present to you the biological, agricultural, political, economical, and environmental perspectives of phosphorus, and just a glimpse into recycling, alternative sources, and potential adsorbents. And from there, we'll get to our work, which focuses on phosphorus recovery and reuse by combining two waste materials, because I've heard that you're interested in waste reusing. And then I will have a second part of the talk, focusing on my recent study in recent years of enhancing phosphorus bioavailability using sorbing materials, the biogeochemical perspectives. And I will, of course, summarize stuff. So the biological importance of phosphorus lies in the fact that phosphorus is involved in key molecules like DNA and RNA, and in key processes like energy storage and supply. This is why, because of its biological importance, it is an essential macronutrient in agriculture, supplied as a liquid or a solid fertilizer. Phosphorus is a limiting nutrient, and shortage in phosphorus will limit plant growth and threaten food security. This is why farmers tend to apply phosphorus fertilizers in overdoses, and we will later get into the consequences of this operation. Chemical phosphorus fertilizers are manufactured from phosphate rock, also called phosphorite. Phosphorite rocks have deposited and solidified in biologically rich deposition environments, aquatic biologically rich deposition environments, through tens of thousands of years, and are non-renewable. So this is why we need to remember that this source is limited. Phosphorite rocks are usually rich with fossils, and the phosphorus purification is not straightforward and requires energy and may yield a lot of waste. Also, of course, any mining activity has an environmental impact of mining waste. The political aspects of phosphorus brings us to the question, who holds the world's phosphorite rocks? So both figures point to Morocco as holding around between 70 to 75% of the world pools of phosphorus. About the phosphorus trade flow, China is the biggest producer, but it is an internal consumer. So what it produces, it consumes. Morocco, as we mentioned, is not only holding most of the phosphorus, but it's also the biggest exporter. Europe is mostly dependent on importing. And that means that whoever holds phosphorus holds a political power because of its agricultural importance, of course. Phosphorus economical aspects. We can look here at the prices changing throughout the years. Prices in euro per metric ton. So although with the geopolitical aspects comes the economical aspects of phosphorus. Although phosphorus prices were usually stable, major peaks were recorded, sometimes demonstrating the political power of phosphorus exporters, and sometimes demonstrating geopolitical and economical global instability. Prices of phosphorus are forecasted to increase. We shall soon see what are the reasons for that. You can see here at the end of the curve that it starts to increase, and it is forecasted to continue increasing. The demand for phosphorus grows together with the increase in the world population. Okay, you can see the world population, you see here in black, how it grows so nicely. And together with it, the demand growth of phosphorus continues in purple, continues from the historical global production. So this, of course, is needs to grow because the population grows and you cannot stop that. Okay, talking about between 2 to 3% of yearly increase. So in fact, phosphorus rock reserves are dwindling and are about to diminish within several decades, up to 100 to 150 years. Let's see the quote here. At current rates of use, a lot of countries are set to run out of their domestic supply in the next generation, including the US, China, and India. Morocco and the Moroccan occupied territory of Western Sahara host by far the largest reserve, with China, Algeria, and Syria, the next biggest, together representing more than 80% of global rock phosphate. You can see here the present and future projection for phosphorus sources and reuse, and someone here was talking about a higher efficiency of phosphorus usage. So here is this graph actually presenting those options with the black line up here demonstrating the demand for phosphate in a condition of business as usual. Those are the options of lowering the demand by increasing phosphorus use efficiency. And here are the sources, the option for sources from recovery and reuse. And you can see that this pool, the reservoir of phosphate rock, is about to dwindle and diminish towards 2050, which is not too long from now. And we have other sources that are growing, hoping to improve the supply of phosphorus for food production. So the world is getting into the search for alternative phosphorus sources. In this table from Cordell 2011, you can see phosphorus recovery processes from different sources like wastewater, manure, gray water, but also from other surprising sources like aquatic vegetation and other new potential sources, as you can see down here. So here is a great candidate to be a phosphorus source from wastewater, which is a rich P source. Among them, municipal wastewater and agricultural wastewater are, of course, favorite because they don't hold all kinds of toxins. And they're more suitable for further usage. Dairy wastewater are a good option because it contains several tens of milligram phosphorus per liter. But we must remember that this source has a changing quality during the year. At any event, this source needs a pre-treatment before this being discharged to municipal wastewater treatment facilities. And otherwise, if it is not treated and it reaches the environment, it may harm the environment, and we can talk about it when we talk about phosphorus environmental aspects in the present slide. So phosphorus pollution, I remind you that phosphorus is a limiting nutrient, limiting biological growth. So excessive concentrations reaching water bodies like oceans, rivers, lakes, streams will lead to algae blooms, toxic microorganisms blooms like cyanobacteria, unbalancing the ecological system, leading to eutrophication. Excessive concentrations may originate from either overdosing fertilization or from untreated wastewater that reach the environment. You can see the result of actually phosphorus pollution reaching water bodies. I think it is quite known a problem in Europe and in the States. Maybe you heard about it in the past in your locations. In Israel, we didn't reach this state so far. Usually not, actually. It's not totally. So we get back to the practical side of our story. In order to prevent excessive phosphorus pollution, and also in order to recycle phosphorus, a great global effort takes place in search for optimal phosphorus adsorbents. For example, Wendling and collaborators published in 2013 a very big review of phosphorus sorbents. This is just part of a long list of potential adsorbents. Many studies consider all sorts of synthetic materials produced especially to recover and recycle phosphorus. The first emphasis that I will give here is at all kinds of adsorbents that are based on iron or aluminum oxides. That might not be too bioavailable, the phosphorus that are being held with those materials because of the strong bonding between iron and aluminum and phosphorus. And the second material that I want to emphasize is a group of materials called LDH. I will mention them in a minute, but please note the comment here. It says unknown biological availability for sorbed phosphorus. And this is indeed one of the questions that I was trying to answer, and I already have the answer, and I will present it later on in our talk. So water treatment residuals, the recycled materials, in short, we call them WTRs. Those are actually waste materials, byproduct of water pretreatment processes. They are formed when a coagulant is added to surface water to remove suspended solids. The sludge is being formed at the bottom of the treatment tank, containing oxides formed when the salt, the coagulant, was added and dissolved. And also it contains suspended solids that deposited because of the addition of the coagulant, and some organic compounds, and even some dissolved ions like phosphorus. This is a group of materials that was already found to have a great sorbent capacity for phosphorus. We used alum sludge from Eshkol Reservoir after treating the Sea of Galilee drinking water, and ferric sludge from desalination treatment plants at the south of Israel. Okay, so we have the aluminum WTR and the iron. Sometimes it's being written as iron DTR. Sometimes you will see it as WTR. The D is for desalination, but otherwise we should just call it iron WTR. Okay, it's a water treatment residual from or consisting on iron oxides. If we will take a look at the chemical composition of those two materials, the original chemical composition, you can see they are both of them are very heterogeneous. And you can see that there is OM is for organic matter. You can see we have also a silica and a calcium oxides, probably calcium carbonate, aluminum oxides, iron oxides, sulfur, magnesium, some phosphorus, but not enough. And also, I must say that this phosphorus is being held very strongly, and all sorts of other compounds and components. And although we call them aluminum-based WTR or iron-based WTR, you can see that the aluminum and iron, they are not the most of the material. They are just part of this waste material, but they're very important for phosphorus. So what does the previous research has discovered already? So usually it focused on the aluminum-based WTRs, yet we can draw the conclusions also for iron WTR because of the similar character. The main question was whether aluminum WTR was a source or a sink for phosphorus in the soil when applied to the soil. It was found that adsorption took place mostly onto aluminum oxides, and that adsorption capacity decreased in alkaline conditions. Studies emphasize the importance of surface adsorption followed by diffusion into inner sites. I will show something about it later on. In many occasions, WTR's applications to soils resulted in decrease in phosphorus availability to the plants. The reason is that the WTR in use were either not saturated, like the original materials, so they actually absorbed phosphorus from the soil, lowered the pool of the biologically available phosphorus, or they had a pre-treatment of saturation with inorganic phosphorus that was very strongly tied and bound, chemically bound to the aluminum WTR. So it didn't release, no phosphorus, not enough phosphorus was dissolved and could be consumed by the plants. So of course, a new and innovative approach was required to use the WTRs, not only to purify excessive phosphorus from the environment and prevent phosphorus pollution, but also to make recycling of phosphorus possible. So based on all this, we made a hypothesis that if the source of phosphorus will be an organic solution rich with phosphorus, then mixing it with WTRs will enrich the WTR with phosphorus, but also with organic compounds. And what is the idea behind that? What is the rationale? So first, dairy wastewater are rich with phosphorus. They can be themselves a phosphorus source. And second is that organic compounds in the wastewater impact phosphorus sorption, either adsorption or precipitation, enhancing its bioavailability. And I will show this later on. So this was our first stage of work, production of the P-enriched organic composites. We call it either WW, aluminum OWTR, or FeO WTR. It comes to tell you that it is an organic composite because it was rich with organics as well. Our stage 2 was characterization, understanding phosphorus sorption in order to assist in its release. So it wasn't only our interest in the geochemistry of the aluminum WTR or iron WTR, but of course it had a practical motivation behind it. So I will go with you briefly through the most important findings regarding the organic composite characteristics that may contribute to it as a potential phosphorus fertilizer. First, we quantify the phosphorus sorption onto the organic composite. When we mix the WTRs with the dairy wastewater, we measured concentrations of organic phosphorus, inorganic phosphorus, organic phosphorus, and dissolved organic carbon, DOC, in the wastewater before and after mixing with the WTR, with the solid. And from this, we could get into the rates of removal. And you can see that there was a preferential sorption of phosphorus, of inorganic phosphorus, usually above 90%. There was also a nice removal of organic phosphorus, and of course also removal of dissolved organic carbon, that is the dissolved organic compounds. I must also mention that it is not constant through the years, those great rates of phosphorus removal. It may change during the year with the change of temperature, of course with the change of concentration in the original wastewater, that also change during the year. As I said before, the materials are very heterogeneous with high content of silica, organic matter, calcium, and aluminum oxides. or iron oxides, and all of which may sorb phosphorus in different binding strength. Depends on the chemistry of those components and their affinity to phosphorus. You can see here the results of a sequential extraction method that comes to describe how phosphorus is distributed among different pools, binding pools. At the top, you can see those two pies that present aluminum WTR, the original material, compared to the material, the organic composite of this material after being mixed with the wastewater, the dairy wastewater. I must also mention, we clarify the wastewater before using it, okay? And at the bottom here, the two pie charts here for iron WTR, the original material, and the organic composite of this material after being mixed with dairy wastewater. In both cases, the black color presents the pool of the most labile phosphorus, the phosphorus that is being extracted very easily. How easily? Easily, maybe as imitating the soil solution capacity to dissolve phosphorus. And you can see it grows. In each case, it grows from the original material to the organic composite. Also, this is very strongly displayed in the iron WTR that from the beginning had quite a nice share of labile phosphorus. And that, of course, grew after mixing it with the wastewater, which were phosphorus source, but also contained organic compounds that enhance the weak bonding of phosphorus. Okay, so let's continue. So I mentioned before the importance of where the phosphorus is being bound at the beginning. Previous research emphasized the importance of surface absorption of phosphorus, and indeed we, in different analytical techniques, we checked the content of phosphorus from the original material here in light blue, in cyan color, to the green material, organic composite in green. And you can see that it grew much larger at the surface of the material than in the whole sample, okay? Indicating that there was an accumulation, excessive accumulation of phosphorus at the surface in comparison to the whole material, to the whole sample. So I had to check the surface, how phosphorus is being held at the surface of the grains, the solid grains of the WTR, the water treatment residuals that we saw before. I used the scanning electron microscope images and element maps of the surface of the organic composite of aluminum WTR, indicating association of phosphorus with aluminum and calcium, and with both of them. So here are element maps. Here is the one for calcium, here is the one for phosphorus in red, and here is the one for aluminum. And when you put them together, superposition of the three maps, you can get the superpositions of those colors. And then you get new colors like yellow and cyan and this purplish. And then you can actually identify those associations, the special associations, and from them to learn of the different bonding characteristics. So you can see here some dots spread around in this area, telling us that phosphorus was just absorbed on a large region, while you can see in other places very much bigger spots of a purplish color, telling us that the red, the phosphorus, and the blue, the calcium, were concentrated at that area. You can also find localities of a whitish color. That means that we have an association of the three elements together. So that can give us a lot of information. Just so you can compare, please note, though this is actually the same picture in the scanning electron microscope of this material. And for the same image, we use the EDS program to get the information about the distribution of the elements. Of course, other elements as well, but I focused on calcium and aluminum because they are the most important agents to capture, to sequester phosphorus in our material. So after studying phosphorus sorption, we needed to learn of phosphorus desorption. And we made some desorption experiments a long time. And you can see that at the very first 10 days or 7 to 10 days, phosphorus was very, very labile. Inorganic phosphorus, but also organic phosphorus, tended to be released to the solution, and then later on it was resorbed. But if we are at the roots environment, and we have hungry roots seeking for phosphorus, you can be sure that the released phosphorus will be removed from the soil solution and be uptaken by the plant. And this is especially important for plants that require phosphorus at their first stage of growth. And we have several of those. Everyone, of course, needs phosphorus, but some plants need it, especially at the beginning of their growth. So here we get to the third stage of our story. This is the phosphorus reuse as a fertilizer, bringing us to the question, elution or soil application. So the two options for phosphorus reuse is by either eluting with a chemical solution or direct soil application of the enriched material. Here is a column experiment that we performed for trying the first option of chemical elution. A flow-through column stacked with aluminum-based WTR was first loaded with phosphorus by flowing dairy wastewater through it, of course, clarified wastewater. An attempt to recover phosphorus followed using alkaline solutions that usually resorb it very easily. The maximum recovery was only 33% of the loaded phosphorus. It was suggested that when aluminum oxide pool that is affected by the alkaline solution released P, then chemically opposite P pool like calcium phases actually rapidly resorbed it, resulting in very low recovery level. Very low, quite low. We prefer to reach higher than 33% efficiency. So the second option is soil application. Reusing the enriched material as a solid fertilizer, that means directly applying it to the soil. This was found to be successful, actually. The phosphorus enriched organic composite based on aluminum WTR or iron WTR performed similar to the chemical fertilizer and was proven to be a source of phosphorus rather than a sink. I remind you that in previous studies, people applied the WTR either as it was, and it was further sorbing phosphorus from the soil. But here we see that it actually released phosphorus and made phosphorus available for the plants. You can see in the picture below the different treatments in this particular experiment with the control that didn't receive any phosphorus source other than what was in the soil, in the, of course, poor phosphorus soil. The treatment that received chemical fertilizer, and two examples of treatments of pots that received the WW, aluminum OWTR, which is the organic composite phosphorus enriched water treatment residual. If we want to see the plant height in the different treatments, that here below you can see the control, and above it the different treatments. Also, you can see this demonstration in the dry weight of the lettuce. That demonstrates to us how our product was actually very compatible with the chemical fertilizers. Of course, we performed repeated experiments where they were quite successful, using either the aluminum-based WTR or iron-based WTR, again with lettuce, with basil, with in pot experiment or in the field, also with tomatoes lately. As an intermediate, because I'm not done, summary, I can say that we presented a closed loop of circular economy, including using waste materials for production of a new material, investigating its chemical and physical properties. Of course, I didn't present everything here, and testing its efficiency as an alternative phosphorus fertilizer. Now, after addressing the geochemical and agricultural aspects, new research questions came up in a search for increasing efficiency, and also in light of a broader holistic point of view, which I will, of course, show now. So the new research questions were: how do the WTR materials perform in recycling phosphorus compared to synthetic materials? And also, how do the soil microbiota respond to phosphorus in different chemical configurations? And can we recruit it, the microbiota, to improve phosphorus utilization? Before I present the study, I just want to remind you that this is an ongoing research, actually in those days also, and the work is in process, so we don't have everything. I don't have all the answers, but I have a very nice results already to show you. The name of this study is Enhancing Phosphorus Bioavailability Using Sorbent Materials, the Biogeochemical Perspectives. So the sorbent materials in this comparative study is, first of all, the recycled materials, which you are already acquainted with, the aluminum and iron-based WTRs. And the different group of materials is the synthetic materials. And we focus on LDH, layered double hydroxides. We use I got my hands on two materials, one from the Netherlands, a commercial product, and one from France that was synthesized for this study. The LDH materials, so those are adsorbents that actually came to represent synthetic materials. They adsorb anions like phosphorus very efficiently. The LDH materials are homogeneous in composition, as opposed to the WTRs, if you remember, consisting of magnesium and aluminum oxides. And don't worry, I'm not going to get into their structure. I will go directly to the loading experiment of removing phosphorus from dairy wastewater. So firstly, we performed a loading experiment in which the adsorbents were mixed with the dairy wastewater. The wastewater needs to be clarified first. I will not get into it too much, but I will just mention that we use the two clarification methods. This is why we see here these two figures. Okay, but you can easily see that the removal of phosphorus from the pre-treated wastewater by the LDH material in each case of the pre-treatment was practically completed, while the removal of the recycled material was not as good as the LDH materials, not at all. Okay, so this is one part of the story, the sorption, the loading. The other side of the story is the desorption, of course. We don't want only the polluted stream to be clarified. Of course, we want it to be clarified, but also we want the materials to be able to desorb the phosphorus so we can reuse it. You can see here in this graph the results of an experiment of release of phosphorus using a chemical extractant based on diluted KCl, which comes to represent the ionic strength of the soil solution. And this is very clear results showing that the, let's see what we have in the graph. On this side, on this axis, you can see the different materials, okay, the two LDH materials, and then the two recycled materials. And on this axis, you see the different treatments of those materials. So we had the original materials, we had the materials that were loaded with phosphorus from wastewater with a certain pre-treatment, and then from another pre-treatment. This is also wastewater. And also we checked what happens when we load the sorbing materials with inorganic phosphorus only without the without the contribution of the organic compounds. The straightforward results are here. You can see that the LDH materials hardly released any phosphorus, while the recycled materials released phosphorus from the combinations that were loaded with the wastewater, not from the inorganic phosphorus. And mostly the iron-based WTR released really a very nice load of phosphorus, indicating its so far its best compatibility as being a fertilizer for phosphorus, but we will continue. So the second question, I will go back just one step. Here I used a chemical elution, right? But we must remember that when we apply the materials to the soil, then we also let the microbiota in the soil, that is the roots and the microorganisms, to do their things to extract more phosphorus, to increase its availability. And maybe they can overcome the strong bonding of phosphorus by the LDH materials. Let's get into that. So first I want to present a review and a model that was based on a lot of research that looked into how roots and microorganisms operate in order to promote phosphorus and other nutrients solubility. For example, this model includes two main steps: exudation of organic acids like oxalate and citrate, and then in this sequence, release of enzymes that degrade the organic compounds that hold the different nutrients and release them, making them inorganic. And then, of course, the uptake of the available nutrients. So in our next investigation, we attempted to track this strategy in soils treated with the enriched synthetic and recycled adsorbents that I presented. So a short introduction to this laboratory soil incubation experiment. It took 1 month of soil incubation with the different adsorbents being applied, and the soil sampled a long time. Focus was now given to 2 cases, only the commercial LDH, the one from the Netherlands, and the iron-based WTR. In each case, those adsorbents were enriched with either inorganic phosphorus or phosphorus from the dairy wastewater. We tracked soil geochemical and biological parameters, as you can see in the lists here. So here are the results. Solubility of phosphorus in the soil, you can see in the graph here, was highest with the iron-based WTR enriched with phosphorus, enriched like the rest of them. Microbial phosphorus in the 2 graphs below. You can see that phosphorus from the microbial cells, okay, microbial phosphorus means that it was phosphorus that were released from microbial cells. So it was highest for the treatments that were treated with the LDH, with the wastewater, either the LDH material that was enriched with the wastewater or the iron-based WTR that was enriched with the wastewater. Regarding the strategies that we mentioned before, I mentioned the exudation of organic acids. So I found that in the tested soils, malic acid showed very interesting profile of release. You can see several peaks in the different repetitions of each treatment. What you see in each of the graphs are different total or chemical or biological repetitions. That is totally different samples. They're not analytical samples from the same pot. And they all show very similar behavior of several peaks a long time throughout the 30 days of incubation. After that, we can see the behavior of the enzymatic activity. We looked at also the deesterase, phosphodiesterase activity and the phosphomonoesterase activity. And you can see also that in all the treatments, we had very similar behavior. Sometimes we see that the treatment that was treated with the iron-based WTR enriched with wastewater gave the highest activity, but it's not such a big difference to the other treatments. And that brings us to the big question. I'm getting back. Those soil incubations were without plants. I was just looking at the microorganisms strategies to release phosphorus, but that was without the presence of roots in the soil. And roots can enhance, of course, the release of phosphorus, and maybe they can overcome the strong bonding of the LDH materials. So nowadays, actually really nowadays, now we are at the 6th week of the experiment. We are running this lettuce growing experiment with the different treatments of the LDH, synthetic LDH material and iron-based material, both phosphorus enriched from dairy wastewater source, of course. We are checking on 3 application rates to look for the optimum concentration application. This is a lettuce growing, of course, about 6 to 8 weeks, which is similar to a total growing season. And the preliminary results from the 3rd week. since then, since this picture was taken, there were another 3 weeks, and the differences between the different treatments are just growing. Actually, this noontime, a few hours ago, I was at Tel Hai at the north, and I can tell you that the plants that are fed by the LDH material kind of kept the same height as you can see here, while the plants that were treated with the iron-based WTR are much bigger than what you see here. And already after 3 weeks, you can see the big differences between them. Okay, so with the roots also, the phosphorus is not available, not available enough for a good growth of a plant, or at least for a lettuce plant. That brings me to the conclusions finally. Combining two waste materials has produced a material that was proven to be a good phosphorus source for plants. The synthetic materials presented much better performance in phosphorus sequestration compared to the recycled WTRs. But phosphorus in WTR is more bioavailable than phosphorus in LDH, the synthetic material, to lettuce plants. Biological activity in soil environment did not overcome the strong phosphorus absorption by LDH, and WTRs enriched with phosphorus from dairy wastewater have much higher potential to become an efficient alternative to chemical fertilizers. And with this, I want to acknowledge our funding sources, like the European Union Fund of Syria Center, BARD, National Agricultural Research and Development Fund, that was given to Igali Tahor, the head of the hydrogeochemistry laboratory where I operate, and to Jimmy Polito and Mike Massey from the USA, and also grants from the Israel Ministry of Agriculture and Israel Ministry of Science. And of course, I want to thank the hydrogeochemistry laboratory staff, the undergraduate students that contributed to this research, and to the graduate students, and we have also laboratory assistants. And with this, okay, this is the whole story. But of course, we can get back to you. And if you have questions, I will be glad to answer.
Thank you, Iris. That was fascinating. And let's see, if people want to ask questions, you can either type them in the chat or raise your hand, and Julia or I will call you out for asking the questions. There's not that many people, so you can just go ahead and probably ask your question as we go. And to just start the discussion, I can ask a question, and I think it's a little bit maybe out of your comfort zone, Iris, because obviously you're a biogeochemist, and I think your results are pretty convincing that if you use wastewater and enhance it with some additive, you can get much better results in terms of both getting rid of the wastewater and also reusing it and using it instead of the phosphorus rock fertilizer. However, if you look at the whole process in terms of economics, if you have you done any cost benefit analysis in terms of how does it compare in terms of costs, and particularly if you upscale it beyond your little experiment?
Okay, so of course this is a very big question and very important one. One of the students tried to address it in his work in the past. He didn't get into a great results so far, and I'm going to address it in the next few months. It is actually the very last part of my 4 years research, the research that I showed with the name enhancing, the second part of my talk, with a comparison to synthetic materials. So of course, cost-effective analysis must take place. At any event, we are trying to improve the process of the loading. As you could see, once we have the material loaded and we apply to the soil, it works very nicely. Of course, if it will be more loaded, maybe we can use a smaller amount and to get the same good result. But in order of minimizing the energy cost, so we want to reduce the time of loading. By now, because I was working with a geochemical idea in my mind, I wanted to make sure of saturation. So we made the loading experiments of 3 days, shaking the wastewater, the clarified wastewater, and the solids, the WTRs together to have the loading. And this is geochemically very coherent to make sure of we get full saturation. But of course, to make it more cost effective, we need to shorten this time. So maybe we will play with the temperature, maybe we will play with other factors. And I will have better answers of the cost effective aspects in a few months. Perfect. And also, I want to mention in the hydrogeochemistry laboratory, also there is a big project that is going to start soon of how to make more efficient the whole process in order to make it more effective economically, more compatible.
Meaning upscaling.
Yeah, exactly. In any case, we were upscaling, but upper scaling.
Go ahead, Sue.
I wondered if you'd tested the plants at all to find out if they had accumulated anything that they shouldn't have done. I mean, what was grown edible?
If we were growing plants?
Yes, so you grew lettuces.
Yeah.
Did you analyze the plants themselves, the lettuces?
Of course. Yeah. We grew lettuce and basil and tomatoes, and we ate them all.
Oh.
They were very, and basil, yeah, they were very edible and very nice. And of course, I didn't show it. Indeed, I didn't show it. Yeah. Of course, we measured the phosphorus content and other nutrients or chemical components inside them to make sure, for example, when using the aluminum-based WTR, to make sure that we didn't have excessive levels of aluminum, and no, we didn't. I think even the fertilizer had higher levels, so there was no problem with that. But we definitely always keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And what about the soil that the plants grew in? Did you analyze that as well?
Of course, yes. Because we are soil people.
Yes.
So we tried to learn about the benefit effects, the positive effects of applying the WTRs in the soils in the long run. So let's say like that, in the short run, I increase the phosphorus levels of the residual materials in the soils. But in the long run, I must confess that myself, I'm a bit worried about just applying these materials in the long run, because whenever the plants will take the phosphorus out of it, then the materials which will be not saturated anymore might start take phosphorus from the soils. So this is why so far we are trying we tried also in the field, but usually we are working in pots so it's not like we are not harming the free soils. And there are all kinds of ideas how to prevent long run problems, like maybe putting the materials in little bags and removing them and stuff like that, like nylon bags. But this has to be checked in the long run also.
Thank you.
It looks like Kevin has a question. Do you want to ask it, Kevin, or if you're...
Daniel is raising his hand.
Yeah, so Kevin first and then Daniel. Kevin, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, or would you like me to read from the chat?
Kevin, you're still muted.
Thank you very much, Iris. That's a really nice study, and it's something very similar to what we're doing here in South Africa. And it's just really great to see the methods that you are using. We've tried, and I guess this might be a little bit idealistic, but we're trying to avoid the addition of further chemicals. And so how do we avoid adding alum and iron into a precipitation process where we can obviously extract phosphorus and other nutrients from it as well? And I just wondered if you'd also explored that as another option of using nature-based media as an alternative. And I guess this comes back to the question that was asked around scale and economics and just how much volume of water we can actually process in this way. But because we are really working in this area of nature-based solutions, and I guess that's one of the concepts that we're looking at worldwide at the moment, is there any thoughts on how we could reduce the need to add further chemicals into a process as you've described?
So we don't add any chemicals to the process. We reuse waste materials that were supposed to be, not supposed to be. They're still around the world. They're being sent to landfill. They're being landfilled. Maybe you're asking how to do the coagulation process without using chemicals. This is not our part of the story.
Basically, I think, Kevin, what Iris is saying is the iron and the aluminum are added in the wastewater treatment process.
No, not in the wastewater treatment process. It's actually from the drinking water treatment process. In all kinds of surface water treatment, clarifying the suspended solids. So many places, it's very common around the world to use coagulants, physicochemical processes using coagulants to deposit all the suspended solids. And then they have a lot of waste. We are coming in an approach to reuse this waste. We don't use new chemicals.
Yeah, thank you. I think I understood that in terms of what you were doing, and I just wondered if there was another process without having to. I think to use them is obviously very important, and that's partly what we're trying to do in this project anyway, is to actually reuse the waste. But I think I followed well enough. One of the problems, I suppose, in waste is that it comes in alum and iron comes in very different quantities and concentrations through the system. And I think those are some of the other challenges to projects like this as well. Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing more come up in the comment box here as well. Very helpful. Thanks very much, Iris.
Thanks, Kevin. Daniel, do you want to go next? And then Esther.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really useful. Just two questions kind of going back to the sort of start of your presentation. The first question is, we're working with a sewage company in Bristol, and so that the focus is very much on human excreta, if that's the right way of pronouncing it. So I guess the question is, how important do you think human excreta is? Because it was such a small part of the overall picture. So in your kind of understanding of the situation, is it a significant part? Because there's two ways you could look at it. If it's 5% or 10%, you could either see that as either very small, or you could see that as significant. I just wondered if you had a view on whether or not it was a significant part of the recapture requirement.
I'm not sure that I understand your question. We use dairy wastewater, and municipal wastewater, of course, are also maybe a good source.
So you're in terms, because you presented at the beginning the peak phosphorus challenge, and you had a great graph, which I've seen somewhere before, which listed all the main.
You want me to bring it up on?
Yeah, could you? That would be great.
We just lower your part of the.
I think, Iris, what Daniel is referring to, the fact that the wastewaters are not a large fraction of the total phosphorus here.
That's it. Yeah. So you can see human excreta right down the very bottom there. And I guess one thing that we're looking at in cities, certainly in Bristol, is, you know, what variables does the city potentially have control over? I mean, not that it has control over this much at all, but it has more control over human behavior within a city than, say, agriculture outside the city. I mean, you could argue that it's through, you know, consumption behaviors and things like that, but we haven't got to a stage yet where we can get into that. So anyway, I was just wondering if you're aware of any dialogue that's looked at where the focus should be in terms of that peak phosphorus challenge. That's one question. The other question was about the price of phosphorus. And this is something that the UK water industry has just this month highlighted as an area that needs exploration. And it's a question that our partner in Bristol put to us right at the very beginning. And so I'm just wondering, again, looking at that policy dimension, do you have any, are you aware of any studies that have looked at government intervention on the price of phosphorus in terms of regulating its use?
Well, it's totally not in my field of work. I can say that from talking with other scientists in conferences, stuff like that, I was also asking about does the government or governments in places put an action into it and try to get involved to promote promote the recycling of phosphorus. And I was given all kinds of answers, and I was actually in all kinds of European meetings that were talking a lot about I think the big problem that everyone were facing was the need for the government to be more involved in the phosphorus prices and promoting the studies. I cannot say that I have an updated answer.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wondered if it was something you're aware of, but no, thank you again.
We also tried in our country to get more promotion from the government, and it's not so easy. They're not that aware of those graphs. You saw the price of phosphorus was quite stable, and now it's growing, but it's usually quite stable. So maybe the governments are not yet aware of and worried about the prices and what's going to change, the increase in demand, the dwindling of the resources.
But it looks very nicely from this figure that there's more than one answer to this question of increasing availability. So, you know, you can increase or supply by the recovery and reuse, which will answer a third of maybe, based on this graph, of the demand. But there's definitely changing diet and food chain efficiency and agriculture efficiency, which are also dependent on human behavior, which will need to be addressed.
They're making the bigger part of facing the demand.
Yep. So let's go. We said that Esther is next. Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, thank you very much, Iris, for your presentation. It will be very useful for us because we have here a PhD student, Renato Lopez, that is investigating the relations between the food production, on the board, at the board of the rainforest, and the dam's water. So phosphorus, of course, is the eutrophication issue. Only a comment and then a question. In Brazil, as you know, everything in scale, happens in scale. So we have a huge problem with phosphorus and eutrophication due to the sewage water, the gray water, and especially because all over Brazil we have more than more than 250 million cattle heads. So you imagine what this is. So our solution, of course, is a very different solution for Israel or small countries, but it means we need new technologies, yeah, as you have been presented it. If we look for fertilizers markets, you know, fertilizers markets have a huge entry barriers, yeah, to put new technologies to substitute phosphorus in fertilizers is very difficult. So we need, and this is true for Brazil or for Israel or for any country, yeah? We need eco-innovation policies. And I know, but I think I know about Israel's innovation policies development. Are you looking for a new product? You have an innovation for phosphorus treatment? Because for instance, here, I am only an example. I am a collaborator in agriculture and climate change, huge project from my state. São Paulo is in the southeast of Brazil. And this project implies the development of drug-resistant plant varieties. And the studies with, it's a genomics project to develop genetic modified corn varieties, yeah? So the solution is another kind of solution. We are thinking about the microbiota is going to solve the phosphorus problems, yeah? Of course, for corn plantations. Finally, how do you see these markets? Because we have technology innovation markets now, yeah, and it's a challenge for all of us. In Brazil, we do not have now good policies for eco-innovations, for the diffusion of new technologies like yours, yeah. But we have been working hard.
Yeah. Also here it's not, the government is not pushing towards it enough, I believe. Of course not. But the technology is there. It's also, it's again, like I answered before, the main idea from those meetings in Europe, in Italy, is that we have the technology, we have the knowledge, but we need more push from the government, more boost, economical boost to start to use them before it's too late, or before we find ourselves with a great shortage of phosphorus. And yes, I understand that you're looking at the biological aspects of recruiting the microbiota.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's very interesting. This is...
Well, I am not the leader. The leader is a guy who has developed sugarcane new varieties for Monsanto, and it's an enterprise. So my question is, in Israel, we know there is a more strong initiative on innovation-driven science. In Brazil, we do not have exactly this. Yeah. So you have an innovation-driven science.
We're trying. We're working. We started recently to work, or we are trying or looking into work with the industry, with the commercial companies, but it's not really relying on the government. Not at the moment. We tried in the past. It didn't really work. Now we're trying the industry, because it is a good product.
Maybe we could talk about it, because one of my partners here in São Paulo is the São Paulo Water and Sewage company, that is Sabesp. It's a $20 billion company in the New York stock market. So I would like to talk with you about it. They need new solutions.
Gladly.
Yeah,
thanks, Esther. So Iris, I've got another kind of different question here, not about implementation or regulation of the application, but attitude of the consumers or the people that will eat the lettuce or will go the next stage. I know in the US it's a very tough issue, even, you know, reusing of water that is treated, that is went through tertiary treatment or even, you know, very clean. The people are reluctant of using it even to water plants. This whole idea of, you know, toilet to tap or stuff like that makes people very uncomfortable here. Is that something that you face, or is that, you know, the reluctance of the end users because they know it's coming from sludge or from cow manure or whatever?
Okay, I cannot tell that. I cannot say that everyone are aware of it, but in Israel, most of the irrigation water are effluent water of all kinds of qualities from wastewaters, because we are a country, a dry country. So we need to reclaim wastewater and use them as irrigation water. So in any event, this is what's happening nowadays.
Yeah, no, I am totally aware of it.
Yeah, but I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. It's not that everyone are aware of it, but it's there anyway. So yeah, it is true though that microbial assays should take place and make sure, well, they take place anyway, and they checking on the quality of the fruits and vegetables to make sure that there is no contamination with germs or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So people are not reluctant to buy lettuce that is grown with manure, cow manure.
I think that people just don't think about it too much.
They don't realize that. Yeah, I think here the awareness is, you know, people are more involved in this decision making. It's not as much, at least in California, a top-down regulation. So people always have ideas that are not necessarily justifiable, because I know that, you know, the treated water is sometimes cleaner than other sources, but people still are reluctant.
I will mention the organically labeled crops. They're usually being treated with compost, right? With the manure compost, whatever, with from organic sources. But they charge more like higher prices for the organic plants and fruits, and people are very happy to buy them.
Yep, it's weird. I see Daniel has another question. Go ahead,
I
Daniel.
have one too, Ulrich.
Okay, Ulrich, you go first because Daniel already asked one, and
Well,
then Daniel go after you.
It's still related. I mean, it's two questions. What happens at the moment in Israel to the human manure or the human excreta? Because that must be, I don't know, 6 million or 7 in Israel. Must be quite a big source. What have you? I know you haven't looked in it, but that's what he said. So what happens with that at the moment?
In general, or we didn't use it
with the phosphorus in it, because it's a big phosphorus source, isn't it?
Reservoir, that's true.
Yeah, for big cities like Haifa or whatever is close to you.
Exactly. So actually, it's not being wasted. It's actually being applied to the soil directly as irrigation water, because especially in Haifa, where I visited a few years ago, the wastewater reclamation plant, the wastewater are being treated very well, and then they are being delivered to Emek Israel, where I live, to be used as an irrigation water. So okay. Now,
and the solids, what happens with the solids?
Exactly. Actually, most of the phosphorus will be in the solid portion, right? Yes. Not in the sludge, in the sewage sludge. So it was common, it was useful as a soil additive. And actually, nowadays, there is a lot of trouble around the new regulations regarding not approving further application of sewage sludge to soils in Israel. So I cannot tell what will happen in few months. I just know that now there is a lot of riot about it, about new regulations and how to deal with the wastewater and with the sludge, and how to deal with it at all, not only as a phosphorus source, not at all, but as a organic material, stabilized organic material.
I think in the past it was just treated somehow to remove living like bacteria and then used as a sludge applied to the fields in many cases.
Yes, and this is what I'm saying, that nowadays there are new regulations that bringing a question about further using it as a soil additive. And this brings up big problems regarding what will be the solution of it. Maybe inclination or land filling. It's a problem.
And another small question that relates really to your work. So if this dirty water or wastewater from the dairy industry is not treated by your system, what would normally happen? Would they irrigate it as well, or what would be the normal use? I know they have quite big dairy farms in Israel. Yeah.
They cannot use it as irrigation water because the levels are very high.
Oh,
phosphorus and of organic matter, suspended organic matter, and they need a solution. I cannot say that there is a solution nowadays. I did mention at the beginning of my talk that they need to treat them even before sending them to a wastewater treatment plant because the levels are too high. So they require a solution. It's not that the WTR, it's not that the water treatment residuals can take care of all the dairy wastewater, but here is another option.
Thank you. Yeah,
I know that, Ulrich, I know that in the US, in certain big dairy production areas, they have these troughs where they put the sludge and they hope that it will, the natural bacterial processes will decompose it. They have a huge problem with that because it leaks into the groundwater. So they have these plumes of contamination around the big dairy facilities because of that. And there's a lot of research in that area as well.
I must mention in this case that any microbial processing will end up only with phosphorus being maybe turning into an inorganic compound and being precipitated with some other chemical components, because it has a high affinity for calcium, for aluminum, for iron, as I mentioned, and it will precipitate, and but it will not vanish. It's not like nitrogen that might get into the atmosphere, or carbon, which we don't want them to get into the atmosphere.
No.
Carbon, at least.
Iris, there's a lot of discussion in the chat that maybe you have some ideas about. I think it started with Daniel's question about if we are to change what the type of food we're eating. Is there any idea which foods demand less phosphorus compared to others? Is there any knowledge of that?
Myself, I don't know, because I'm not, again, it's not my field, but as you can see here in this graph, of course, there is also looking into changing diets and making more efficiency regarding the food chain. And I did hear it otherwise in other places, but I raise a question regarding it. We need phosphorus as well. Do we want to have poor phosphorus food? I'm not sure. Then we will be told to take additives. Maybe we will make additives out of the wastewater.
But the question is, Iris, how much phosphorus are we taking into our diet versus our needs? and how much of it is, going out with our excrement. So it's a balance too. But, if you can have certain foods that still provide us with enough phosphorus, but, you eat more this type of tomato versus carrots, I don't know, that, it's a nutritional balance. But the question is that information even available that people can make decisions?
I believe so, but I don't know more than you. I know less than you in that. But it makes sense. But it needs to be checked. I just wouldn't just gladly run into it, because I remember that I'm a biological organism myself, and all of us, and we do need phosphorus. It's not that we want to get rid of it. We don't want to get it out of our food chain.
Yeah. There's very few plants who that you could breed a little bit. It's called nutrient efficiency breeding, but it's really limited what you can do. Most plants need phosphorus, and I don't think that can ever change. So yeah, that's where we are.
So when we're talking about agriculture efficiency, it's not so much certain plants require more or less to be grown, but actually the fact that we don't lose it, so slow release and things like that.
Yes, and what it is called is nutrient efficiency. Is also that some plants mainly have very deep roots, so they can access more of the natural phosphorus in the soil. The same is with trees, for example. I mean, that's what how rainforests work, or other things. But so they can just get more of this phosphorus which is in the soil. But our normal plants are kind of weaklings in a way. They wouldn't they wouldn't really get to it. So therefore you need to give them the phosphorus in an amount, because obviously at the end it becomes part of the food, and then we eat it. So yeah, so it needs to be. I mean, because we are more people, we need more phosphorus in the system, because before, that's just a numbers game. With 9 billion, you have to have more phosphorus running around as compared to 1 billion people, and that has to come from somewhere.
But it also it depends on the crop that you're talking about as well. So if you're talking about a commercial crop like I don't know, wheat or barley or something that's grown in hundreds of hectares, it does depend. If you're talking about trees or whatever, perhaps it's not quite so important. I mean, Daniel and I have had this conversation in the chat, because my husband and son, my husband's a part-time farmer and my son is a full-time farmer, and there's still this perception that that farmers put too much fertilizer on their ground. And I mean, I'm very interested in what you've talked about, Iris, from the point of view of this commercial application, and whether you could somehow have a unit on farm that would be able to produce something that you could put on the field or something. But fertilizers cost money, and farmers are quite careful. Well, I know my family is quite careful about the way they spend their money, and so they will only put on what they think is sufficient. So, from the point of view of breeding phosphorus efficient plants or whatever, I would still maintain that it's useful to have something that you can put in the soil, like you were talking about, that plants could actually take up, and then possibly they'd sit there and not then give out any more phosphorus. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'll shut up.
All this discussion is pointing again to the agricultural efficiency, and I understand that you're sensitive about saying that farmers are maybe not so efficient, but we are aware of overusing of at least the liquid fertilizers, which at least in Israel are very common.
No, pelleted fertilizer, solid.
The solid fertilizer is a better story, because if nowadays they developed the slow release phosphorus. So I think that less phosphorus is being wasted. because at least not
That's
too
a
long
good
ago,
thing,
and
yeah.
I guess that it's very common around the world anyway, that a lot of the fertilizers that are being applied are finishing as phosphorus rocks in the soil with very low solubility. All kinds of phosphorus minerals with calcium, for example, or with iron and aluminum. That depends on the environment that we're in. In Israel, it would be with calcium because we are rich with calcium. So then the soluble phosphorus is very low. So farmers add a lot of phosphorus because still it is quite cheap, relatively.
Allegedly, yes.
But with the years, it will get more expensive.
Yeah.
And then everyone will have to be more efficient to get rid of this portion of the inefficiency.
Well, one question is that I have no idea if it's happening or not. So there's a lot of food waste, and all of this food has phosphorus. Can we use that to put back on the fields?
I think, yeah, where I saw it, it should be running towards, yeah. The sources for phosphorus. So I think it also includes all kinds of crops and waste that are not being used. Here, food waste, you see? At the item A6. So it's another component that should be addressed. I'm not sure it can solve the whole problem, but it can give some contribution of phosphorus.
So in terms of producing a compost from food waste, the companies that produce that sort of separate it out. So the smaller particle sizes that they end up with, they can sell at a plant nursery, so they can make money out of that. Then they've got the stuff that's got the sort of the middle size particle sizes, and that's usually given free to farmers to put on their land. The main problem with that is that you don't really know what's in it. Whereas with the pelleted fertilizer, it's got the recipe on the packet, so you know exactly what the proportions of NPK are.
Yeah.
Whereas with a compost, you don't. And then they just end up with the twigs and the sticks and things at the end that the compost manufacturers that goes to landfill. So yes, there is a way of using it. Sorry, I'm rambling again. And Esther wanted to ask a question.
Only a comment, because again, the market structures are crucial to understand why everyone in the world uses much more fertilizers, including phosphorus, of course, than needed, because the market has anti-social, anti-environmental behavior. And strategies to sell much more, and for food producers use much more. In Brazil, the supply chain network is very well organized to push the use of fertilizers, and we have a strong governmental policy against this. But the transaction costs, you have to go to the property, the rural property, and see who has sold that fertilizer, who is going to give some technical assistance to have much more fertilizer use. So it's a social problem in all over the world. I know, maybe not in Israel, maybe not. I think, I'm not sure, but I think in UK. So Sue's family is an exception, of course. They are antisocial guys.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's not very simple to struggle against this kind of market. Well,
Married to
I
one,
think
I
we
know.
have some how to do this, but the regulatory issues are again the main and innovation diffusion like this, yeah, from Iris. That's why we are working with Yuba Wells, of course. Yeah.
Well, at least I think right now people are starting to think about that, and the awareness is increasing for more increasing efficiency, reducing weight. There's obviously not one answer to every place and every situation, and multiple solutions, even if they add a little bit, are needed. If there's no more questions, I suggest we thank Iris again for her lovely presentation, and we will put the PowerPoint and the recording on the webpage in the near future. And Iris shared her contact information, so if anybody wants to continue with discussion and asking her more specific questions, you're welcome. I'm sure she'll be happy to do that.
Definitely.
So
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you, Iris.
Thank you very much.
Interesting to get to know you, this group.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for organizing, Adina, as well. Much appreciated.
thank you all. We'll send the email soon with the poll for the next one, which will be in December. So I hope everybody will respond to that and participate.
Yeah. And maybe we can work together in the future for other projects. You know, there was quite a lot of Evan said it, and I'm interested in that. The phosphorus thing is really important for agriculture to get to it from the farms. That's really good. Yeah.
And I've saved the chat in case anybody wants it. By the way. Yeah.
That's good.
Yes, Sue, that's a good thing. Save it so we can have that as well.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you again, everybody, and take care.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe. Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.